Greetings cinephiles and hunters alike, welcome back to Beyond the Credits, and today we're going to be diving into the newest film in the Predator franchise directed by Dan Trachtenberg, Predator Badlands. This is the 7th film in the Predator franchise where for the first time ever we follow Dek, a young Yautja warrior cast out from his clan who must prove his worth by hunting and slaying the ultimate adversary. But during his hunt, Dek comes in contact with a synthezoid called Thea, played by Elle Fanning, who informs him that he may not be alone in his hunt. That's all I'm going to say without spoiling anything, but let's get this hunt started, shall we? So a quick little context info dump for you. I was incredibly excited for this movie because Predator is one of my favorite franchises of all time. Recently, I did make a video where I talked about the movie that made me fall in love with horror movies, which was none other than 2018's It Chapter 1. Go back and watch that video if you haven't, it's pretty good. But after watching that movie, in my pursuit of watching horror movies, there were a couple of them that I watched first. Some of these being Halloween, The Thing, Gremlins, and last but not least, Predator. And ever since, I have been an absolute mega fan of this franchise. The first film is contention for one of my favorite films of all time, and the others all hold a really special place in my heart, except The Predator. God, I hate that movie so much.
Hey Baxley, if your mom's vagina were a video game, it'd be rated E for everyone.
That's funny.
So when Disney acquired Fox back in 2019, I was so incredibly nervous that this franchise would just be subjected to a life of shitty, half-baked, straight-to-streaming Predator movies. But miraculously, something amazing happened. In our darkest hour, a man emerged from the rubble of the Predator. A man who would change the course of the franchise forever. He goes by many names, some call him Jesus Christ, some call him the Messiah, some call him Michael Jordan. But mere mortals like myself simply call him Dan Trachtenberg, who graced us Predator fans with Prey in 2022, and finally breathed some new life into this franchise. Prey took us back to 1719, where we followed a young Comanche warrior named Naru, facing off against a Predator in a pursuit to prove herself to her clan, acting as a prequel of sorts, showing how the Predators have been around throughout our history. And just like a phoenix from the ashes, the franchise was back. Dan had proved that the Predator franchise still had some life to it, which was mainly because, like us, Dan was a huge fan of the franchise before he was put on to direct Prey. So naturally, that love and passion for the franchise reflected onto the final product. Funny how that works, huh, Hollywood? But Dan wasn't done yet, because he secretly began to work on another project, something fans of the Yautja have always wanted to see, which came in the form of an animated anthology film titled Predator, Killer of Killers, which was released earlier this year, which took us back to 3 different periods in history: 841 AD, 1629 feudal Japan, and 1941. The film depicted 3 entirely unique stories of a predator coming down to Earth to hunt that period's greatest warrior. And when I say that this film was amazing for Predator fans, that may be an understatement, because it was exactly what the fans had asked for so long, becoming the highest rated film of the franchise, and personally one of my favorite films of the year. It's honestly kind of amazing how Dan just came in here, gave us an amazing entry in the franchise after so long, by the way, like it had been years, and then just a little bit later said, you know what? Another one. And I gotta say, after stepping out of this film, I think that meme continues, because he really made Killer of Killers and said, you know what? I'm not done yet. Another one. The secret at this point is out. I know this review is very late, so you probably already know, but this film is great, despite some worries I had going into it. But before we jump into that, I quickly want to do some self-promotion and remind you guys, we're on our way to 1,000 subscribers. So if you like what you're watching, make sure to sub to the channel and like the video. It helps a ton. But enough of my blabbering, let's get to the good stuff here.
And now, our feature presentation.
Which mostly revolved around the characterization of the Predator, because in the entire franchise, the Predator has never been the main character. He's always been this mysterious, deadly antagonist that a lot of people like just being that. So that instantly presented a challenge for fans who don't want to see the Predator put more into a protagonist role. So a big worry I had was that they were going to strip away the mystery and intrigue of the Predator, because when you get these movies, they show too much oftentimes, and they'll explain things that don't really need to be explained, even though the Predator, and Yautja for that matter, live under a very specific religion and have a lot of really, really good lore. But a lot of fans of the movies don't know that, because the Predator has always been depicted as this extremely mysterious character, something that I guess you may be able to make work to an extent, but you can't just have a predator going around killing random people and expect the audience to care about that character, unless they were like, I don't know, like Nazis. then I guess it's okay. And I know better than anyone that the Yautja have a lot of lore revolving around their moral code and society that could potentially work for a film. Not to mention, I don't think showing the Predator going through emotions would be very hard. But it was more interesting just to see the approach that they go with, which happily leads me to my very first positive about this movie, because I really love how they handled that aspect in the story, as our main character Dek is seen as an outcast to his clan, so his motivation to hunt the biggest game actually has some emotional stake to it, as it's his way to prove himself to his clan and his father. And that religion and moral code that Predators are known for is still a huge focus here. And it's actually what makes this film a lot more interesting as how the plot plays around with this idea, and how Dek, being very loyal to that code, acts in certain scenarios, and how his relationships with the other characters in the story develop in the film. Because if you know the lore from the movies and the comic books, you would know that Predators are extremely independent hunters. So when other characters get introduced, they have to do some really clever things to make that work, because they're always known to be by themselves. But you can't just have that in a movie, and even you could hypothetically, I guess, but it'd be much more interesting to see how a Yautja, especially a young Yautja, interacts with other characters. And it's things like that that I really appreciate so much with this movie, because they easily could have just ignored the lore and just based it off some other clan of Yautja that we've never heard about, but they don't. Dan definitely has a lot of passion for this franchise, and the attention to detail is awesome. And while we're on the Yautja, let's go back to our main character Dek, this young warrior who sets out on a quest to kill the unkillable creature. Like, from what it kind of sounds like, it kind of sounds a bit basic, right? Like, you've heard a version of that story before, and I 100% agree. But what I like about his character and think makes Dek more unique of a protagonist is that he doesn't follow a lot of those story tropes where you have this character who wants to be a man or a warrior, but they're incompetent or weak. Like, sure, Dek slowly gets better at hunting throughout the course of the movie, but he's honestly a pretty capable and proud warrior right from the start that is dedicated to his clan from the start, like I said. So what you're really seeing is him use his training and intuition to deal with certain scenarios or hunt certain beasts, because every little thing wants to kill him on this planet, which I think really makes for some really great action scenes, but it shows the competency of this character, and it shows that he's not a pushover right from the start. But I think my favorite part of Dek's character is his arc in the film, where he goes from this extremely dedicated and proud member of his species to questioning his moral code and religion, and if it's really the right way to live life, especially in a world that wants really nothing to do with him and just wants to keep him down and actively resents him for being quote-unquote a disappointment. And it adds a certain level of depth to his character, which I know some people may roll their eyes at. And listen, for me too, I was a bit nervous about it at first, but I honestly thought it was quite effective, and they developed it throughout the story pretty well. I also gotta say too, I think the effects in this movie are top-notch. Like, Dek himself, I think, looks great. Like, I do not understand all the people who had issues with it from the very beginning. I just kind of took it as a bunch of Twitter babies crying for no reason, because I think the effects on Dek look pretty damn awesome. Not to mention the landscapes that Dek travels to in this film are just gorgeous to look at. Gave me a lot of Star Wars and Dune vibes, but still had a distinct look to it, so it didn't feel like overly familiar. And just in general, the world itself was so incredibly fun and interesting, with all the plant life and creatures on this planet, that honestly just add to it so much, and they add to this sci-fi feel that I feel a lot of times we miss, just because a lot of things have already been done in this genre, but in this film it proves that there's still some stuff you could do with some really cool creatures. Another little thing I enjoyed here was the film's implication of the broader Alien/Predator universe, as the Yutani Corporation from the Alien franchise is in this film, and just as a little context, that's not a spoiler, that's in the trailer. Like, that's extremely obvious from day one. But I just like how they acknowledge the fact that yes, this takes place in the same universe, so naturally some elements from those movies will be brought over to these movies, but it's not really done in a way where it's played up for nostalgia bait, like, I don't know, like a xenomorph showing up for a quick scene and then getting killed off immediately. Like, that doesn't happen in this movie. It's a lot more subtle and straightforward, and I just appreciate that they didn't just resort to random cameos and Easter eggs to tell this story, and just let it be about this new character, and that it doesn't necessarily have to lead up to an Alien vs. Predator 3, or Dek showing up in the next Alien sequel, although that would be amazing. So maybe one day, but not right now. But even though I had some fun with the action and really vibed with Dek's character, and the world building was great, I still don't think this film is perfect, because I do feel like some people may find this film a little bit simple and not formulaic per se, but extremely familiar. mostly in that third act, which, don't get me wrong, is badass. But it's nothing crazy when it comes to narratively subverting expectations. But that's okay, because frankly, this film didn't need to be that. But there will be some people coming out, I think, that will want more from this movie. Another character who I really wanted to talk about was Ellie Fanning's character of Thea in this movie. I was going to discuss her a bit earlier in the video, but unfortunately, I have some slight nitpicks with her character, mostly coming down to when she's first introduced in the movie. As at the beginning of the film, I thought she was kind of annoying, as she was very much being set up as the jokester character, constantly cracking jokes, and it really clashed with the tone of the film, in my opinion. Not to mention, it was kind of jarring considering she is an android, and you're used to them acting like robots and not really having much of a personality. But the more I thought about it, androids have always had their own personalities in the Alien movies, so it's not that weird, except in Covenant. That one, I don't know what they're going for with that one, to be honest. But even with that said, I thought her comedic side really didn't work with the tone of the film, as most of the time this film is pretty serious, so the comedy was best when it was like really short and far between, because I'm not going to sit here and say that it was all bad, because I can't. I laughed at a couple parts, but I can't say that it was laugh out loud funny all the time either. But going back to Ella Fanning, there is a certain point in the story where she does kind of stop her comedy routine, and she does become an infinitely more likable and interesting character, and I absolutely love how they justify her tagging along with Deck, because again, it's faithful to the Predator's lore, and at a certain point you do want her to stay along with Deck because her side of the story is also pretty interesting. But I will say it did come off fairly underdeveloped and mostly followed familiar directions that stories like this revolving around like AI gaining emotions tend to follow. But I do think they do enough to make it stand out a tiny bit, mostly to do with the fact that she plays two characters, so there's a lot of interesting sequences where it's like she's talking to herself in a way and she's discovering new things, so that's good, but there's just not enough of it. So I was really hoping we could have saw a bit more of her character. It would have made that side of the story come off just a bit more emotionally impactful by the end of the film. But that's all I have to really criticize in this film, because I think that this is a really fun alternative take on a franchise that continues to push what it can be and try new things. So moving into the ratings, starting with the critic review, I'm going to give Badlands about an 8 out of 10. I think this film is a damn good watch, and I think the critics will be able to appreciate Trachtenberg's cinematography, vision for action, and interesting storytelling with Deck's character, but may not be able to overlook the over-familiarity of the film. And for casual audiences, I think I'm going to also give it an 8 out of 10, as I think all of the same will apply, but I think audiences will be able to forgive the familiar story a little bit more, but I can't really justify giving it anything more than an 8 out of 10 in my opinion. And for the tagline of this film, I'm simply going to say that even after 7 films, the hunt is always evolving. And that takes us to the end of the review. If you like what you saw here, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe so you can keep up to date with all the channel's newest videos. But until next time, friends, happy hunting. I'll see you later.